Thank you. So, hello everyone, welcome to the yet another Pyvo, our very nice local, but not that local today, community Python meetup. As you can see, we are again in online space thanks to the progressed pandemic, and which we hope soon will be gone, but it allows us to be nicely together. So we've got today Prague and Brno community having this lovely shared time together. We will have hopefully 5 lightning talks today, so this is the main focus. They're wildly different, I believe, so it's nice to see something new, probably. As always, we will have first talks, and after that some kind of a networking slash socializing part. Again, that will not be recorded. After maybe 2 or 3 lightning talks, we will have 5 minutes break to get new liquids if you wish so. And after every lightning talk, you can have obviously questions. So there will be a short Q&A session. And without further ado, Petr, you will be our first lightning talk master, so please take the spot. And maybe unmute yourself.
Oh, I found the controls. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
You can. There's nothing on it, but you can see it. Right, so I wanted to show you this little program. What do you think it does? There's a function OK that prints all OK. There's a function KO that erases your hard drive. You call the function OK, what happens? Of course, it erases your hard drive. How is this possible? Well, this file actually contains some special characters. And this, what my editor shows as a crossed box, is the symbol for backspace. So it deletes this comment mark. It's replaced by space. This deletes all the rest of the line and prints OK. But Python thinks this all is a comment, so it doesn't do that. It just calls the function you can't see. So be very careful if you're using cat. It's much better to use cat-t. It'll show you all the weird characters that might do something you're not intending to do. Another nice program I can show you is let's say score is 0, and then we increase the score. So let's say for I in range 10, we do score +1 and print the final score. And if I run it, it says score is 0. I have this live running program here, so whenever I save it, it'll show up. So this program prints score is 0. Why do you think that is? So this is because some characters look alike. This goes very far back in time. If you look at a mechanical typewriter, you usually won't see the numbers 1 and 0 on it, because the way you would write those numbers is you would go L for 1, capital O for 0, and then all the other numbers have shapes for themselves. So you would use those. And of course, in programming, the capital O will look very different from a 0, because we're all using programmers' fonts, and programmers' fonts are designed to make it easy to see what's going on. The problem here is that there is a lot of different characters including like Cyrillic ones and Arabic ones, and all of the different languages have different characters, and it's not that hard to find something that looks like an O, but it actually isn't. So this score has a Cyrillic O here, so it's not the same as this variable. So I'm incrementing something else than the rest of my program is using. This can, of course, lead to bugs. If somebody's malicious, this can lead to security problems. Another interesting one is things that look like numbers and actually are numbers, but they aren't Latin numbers, or they aren't the numbers we're used to. So this, what looks like an 8, is actually in some language the symbol for 4. And this is a symbol for 2. You need to do this int operation, because if you put this right in your program, it'll say that this is not valid. But the int function and lots of other string functions can take this. So if you want to put an Easter egg in your program, here's the Easter egg symbol. Who knows what numeric value it has? It's 5. It's much more interesting if we look at right to left languages. For example, this string puts this weird little character in the variable s. If I print it, it actually printed 100 of these alepphs. How is that possible? Well, because this is a Hebrew character, and languages like Hebrew and Arabic write backwards from our point of view. So if I look at the Arabic Wikipedia, I see everything's aligned the other way. But for example, numbers are written the way we are used to. So all this text goes left to right to left, and then the number is read left to right, and then the rest of the sentence would go the other way, which is very confusing. And so if I have these characters that change the direction of the text, I can actually do the cat t for this. So this says aleph times 100, the other way around, and then there's a comment, and the other one is in the comment. Right, so this is a source that does something very different than you would expect. Another interesting thing is that numbers are actually written the normal way, or left to right. But if I put a symbol in here, the number changes around, because now it's the text rendering engine sees it as 1 underscore and 9, and it's very different from 19. Quite interesting. Another fun thing is you don't actually need Arabic characters. This is just a normal X, and it does the same thing. How does it do it? There's a special invisible character that can change the direction of the text. So again, if I look at the special characters, there's a very weird character after this X that says, please treat the rest of this thing as right to left. So all of this is again reversed, and you get a bunch of X's, not just one X. Isn't that interesting? You can do a lot more stuff, or malicious stuff with this, but let's move on since this is lightning talk. Python does normalization. So this X with a N up here is exactly the same token as this XN. This is because the N is just a variant of the normal N, and Python considers this the exact same symbol. But there are limits to this normalization. For example, if I have a class that has finalize written with this FI ligature, this ligature will normalize do fi. So I can write test.finalize with fi. I can do it with phi like this. It's all the same. But if I do getAttr, the normalization doesn't apply here. So I get a traceback because it's not applied by getAttr. It's only applied for the tokens the Python language reads from the file. Isn't that interesting? The same thing happens for imports. So I can import finalization and print finalization.message. Let's get rid of this error here. Right, finalization, MSG finalization is just a simple Python file. I can switch this to fi, same thing happens. But if I import finalization with importlib.import module, which uses a string, again, the string is not normalized, so you can run into trouble. This is all very interesting, and if you're serious Python programmers, you should probably watch out for things like these. GitHub nowadays has some warnings that will warn you against some of these tricks in pull requests. I don't think they're complete. I don't think they can be complete, but they are there. And how am I doing on time?
Plenty. Go for it.
There is one more example I would like to show you. So this says, well, let me turn on highlighting. I turned off because it gives away some of the stuff. So for writing Japanese, you don't need an editor that supports UTF-8 source encoding or these weird characters right in your text. You can use Unicode escape sequences. You probably know these. If you do \u and the number of a character, you can get whatever character you want. Isn't that fun? Everybody knows that. So this is hello world in Japanese. What do you think this stands for? Anyone? So if I run this, it actually pops up a calculator. How that is done, I will leave the study to you. So you can ask a question later after lightning talks, or you could read PEP 672, which basically I went through in this lightning talk, and everything's explained there in much more detail. If you have any more questions about this, I'm the author, so I should be able to make changes to this document. Thank you all for your attention, and that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Petr. It was great. We had a lot of positive comments about you typing on a typewriter. It was much appreciated, the hardware touch, in literal sense too. So do we have any questions from the public or private? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nope, that's about it. Okay, thank you. Then number 2 of the lightning talk is me, to be completely narcissistic. Let me share screen and let's find out if I can do that. And probably you should be able now to see my editor.
Yes.
Good. Well, hopefully. So this is going to be a little bit more on the beginners type of the lightning talk. And this is how to use parameterized tests with pytests. Pytest is a lovely library that helps unit testing. Unit testing is a lovely method that helps us to pretend that we are sure that we know what our code is doing, and gives us false hope that it actually works most of the time. And then we can strike our egos when we see the 100% unit tested code base. Pytest makes it, so Python has unit test suite itself, but pytest makes some of the things easier to do. So I created a very little code that actually goes through all the reindeers in Santa's sleigh that I found in Wikipedia's. Apparently there's an alternative naming for South Park characters, but I decided not to use those. And it has two functions: if the reindeer is ready, and get reindeer. And here's just a list of reindeers, and this is a data class. This will be used for only test examples, so don't think about it way too much. So how do we approach to test if everything is ready? So we can go on and we can try to run pytest tests, and we'll start with long test. And this is probably the long way where you create a test and you go all over your reindeers and assert if whatever it's returned by the function is what you expect. It pays off to be verbose, because then you have the higher sense of false safeness. So you can also run with -v to have a little bit more information about what was executed, so you can see that your test has passed. Now, yeah, the advantage of this is that it's kind of verbose, so you see exactly what's going on. But the disadvantage is that you can, let's say, not make happy people that are with a mild OCD, and you can be inconsistent with assertions very easily. I heard that today we can have some people under 18, so just to be sure, I'm trying to find synonyms to use words I'm usually using. Then it's kind of hard to read, and it's also not that easy to refactor if you need to, but it works. Then you have a second option, so you can make it a little bit harder on eyes, but it's more compact. So if you run it, again, you're gonna see that it passes. You just write it, and it's pretty much yet another code that asserts, but now done over arrays. Less typing, but it's even harder to read, and it brings a little bit more complexity to the code itself that could have been a lot easier. Now, there's even a longer way, which also shows why it is not that easy to write presentation in PyCharm, because then you have two B's and whatever, because you forgot some tests anyway. This works, and one advantage of this over the previous ones is that it's very verbose, and you can see a lot of things that you would otherwise miss. If you run with -v, you can see exactly all the tests that pass. We will see a little bit later what happens if you have error somewhere. Now, introducing the parameterized test with pytests finally. It looks like this, and so you import the pytest library. You import, as usual, what you're trying to test, and you use mark.parameterize at the beginning. And here you have the first and second parameter. The first one is the name of the reindeer, and this is what you expect. And then you pass in values of what you're feeding in and what are you expecting back. And really simply, this just goes and asserts around if you run it. So let's say without -v, you can see that every single line, every single reindeer has been then converted into a single test case. If you run it with -v again, you see that those are really run as a single test cases. So already it's a kind of a cross between doing it with arrays or having it kind of compact, yet very readable. And it doesn't bring additional complexity into the testing. Now, what happens if you break something? So you have a broken test and you run it. So this would be the alternative to the first test. And as you can see, yeah, the assertion is wrong. Dense dasher is not correct. It's not ready. But what you can't see is that donor is also not ready. The test finishes here because first assertion and then it's done. It does not continue to following assertions. So if you're doing bigger refactoring, very quickly you will be returned back to the same thing that you could have fixed right away while you've been there. Even if you have a look with -v, it runs it as only one test rather than multiple tests. If you do it with arrays, very similar story. One thing, one test, and somewhere there is an error, not that easy to spot. So this is how it looks like when you break something in parameterized test. As expected, it now shows all the tests that were broken and with which parameters it was also broken. So it is easy to just go into a test and really quickly fix it. Now, we can also return a little bit less trivial data. So it doesn't always have to be true, false, or just strings. You can expect whole structures. You can also expect functions or generators. It doesn't really matter. Everything is object in Python, so you can feed in pretty much anything there. In here, I would like to also show you that it doesn't need to be only 2 parameters. You can have as many parameters as you want. So you have name, which is string, reindeer, which is this, let's say, more complex structure or data object here, and another Boolean. So you just feed it directly into the test, and you make 2 assertions, and it should run. So let's just make sure to run 2 inputs, 2 tests run. Now you notice that there were those marks at the end, and those are very cool features of PyTest where you can make it a little bit more granular to see what's going on and to make it easier for you to run specific parts. So let's say that we will first run it as whole. We are on number 8, parameterized marks. So this is how it looks. So you have 6 passes, 1 skipped, 1 failed, expected, 1 expected passes. Let's have a look with -v for a little bit more detail. So those that pass are good. This one, the X pass, that means that we expect fail, and it fails. Sorry, and it passes. So this is quite weird. This one should be also failing, but it's passing. So you have to be very careful about that. This one should be failing, and it's actually failing. And then we have skipped. So we have here Kevin McAllister, which is from completely different franchise than Santa. And we decided that maybe we will implement him later, but for now, skip him. So it's marked as skipped. So that's another handy mark. Those are pre-made directly with PyTest, but then, as you can see, there are 2 different marks that I've added, which is important reindeer and expensive. And that is that if you go to pytest.ini, you can create your own marks. They are very, very simple to make. You define it and you describe what it should represent. And if you run this pytest.markers, you have a list of all PyTest markers that there are. And you can see up here, right away, those are two that we defined. And they are very handy in a way that you can run, for example, this test. But we will do -m for marker. And we just say, okay, run everything that's for important reindeer. So it runs only those three, this one, and this one, and it skips everything else. You can also run, for example, those that are expensive. And it just runs those, well, probably this one. And you can just assign a list of items that go there. So here, this one should be failed, but it's also expensive. So you have a list of 2 markers that go in. So this brings a little bit more granularity and power to what you are trying actually to run when you need it the most. So we are almost there, and we have here also a way how to do a test for if something raises exception that you probably want to know. So we will go and do this, raise in context, so it passes. And what happens here is that we take from context like null context, and we have 2 contexts there. So one is the context where we raise an exception and pytest is expecting it, or null context, so it should not raise an exception. And here we have yet another character that is somehow from Christmas movies, but it's not really Christmas movie, and doesn't really belong to Santa's sleigh, although maybe it should. And it would raise an exception, so we have it now nicely covered and tested. So last thing I would like to showcase is just running parameterized tests, 1 parameter at a time with IDs. So we will run this one. And at the end, you can see a specific ID for the fixture that we passed in. And pytest can generate them by itself, but they can be kind of cryptic. And for very important tests, you might choose to come up with a bit more wordy ID that helps you to find the test very quickly later. So for example, what we can do, and I would like to now remember how it was done, but probably it was -k. Yeah, so it just runs exactly this test with this parameter. Otherwise, it skips the rest. So let's try this test. Good. This passes for deselected. So this is exactly what we were expecting. And this is it. This is pretty much it, how you can make your life a little bit easier with parameters rather than just writing long and long tests that you can achieve with a lot less typing. Any questions from anywhere? Cool. Thank you very much. So we move forward into next lightning talk, which will be from Lenka. And then after that, we will have a short 5-minute break for liquids. We return back to Sinan and George afterwards.
Okay, so may I start?
Yes, please. The floor is
okay,
yours.
So welcome to my historically first lightning talk at this community, and my topic will be my first year in IT and Python programming. So yeah, good evening, and yeah, those who know me could follow my journey to IT more or less live or online or however the possibility allowed. And now it has been more than 1 year since I've started in IT. So how was my way to change the field to IT? So I started as a PyLady 2 years ago. Consequently, I continued to Chiquita's Digital Academy front-end web. And finally, I ended up in an apprenticeship program where I became a member of software developers team. In my everyday work, I'm using mainly Python and Django frameworks. Django framework. One of the first things I have learned were these parameterized tests that have been just introduced by Jake. So I can confirm they are really useful, and I personally use them a lot. I was able to build several endpoints of the application in Django, and now I am moving a bit towards UI. For one of the endpoints that I've built previously, I am now creating a UI in React, which is kind of tough for me because it is for the first time when I see React. So far, I have been able to create a grid that displays data from the database, but need to get more features into it. Where on the other hand, I'm slowly moving towards also this, let's say, front-end development. And what I wanted to really emphasize during this lightning talk is the importance of this Python community, because yeah, it helped me really a lot. Yeah, it began with yeah, because I was encouraged through one of the members who is here right now, to resign from my previous job where I wasn't happy and start my way towards IT. So among the PyLadies and Chiquitas courses, I also attended the PyWorking sessions that I also considered very useful. Unfortunately, they are stopped now due to the pandemic, but I hope they will be renewed one day. And yeah, mainly the general support during these Pyvo meetings is really awesome, because there has always been someone with whom I could share my concerns, who encouraged me not to stop, not to give up, continue learning. Yeah, they gave me direction what I shall focus on. So this was really a great support for me. And finally, I would like also to mention this Junior Guru community founded by Honza Javorek. That is something absolutely amazing. The atmosphere there and everything around it, especially his guidebook for beginners, full of interesting and useful stuff. This is really something great, and I utilized this a lot. So yeah, that's what I wanted to just to demonstrate, that I am a vivid proof that this community really works. And yeah, you helped me to grow from nothing to where yeah, I am right now, like almost a software developer. I'm still in this trainee program, which will end in 9 months. But yeah, if I look back, yeah, let's say that I really started from zero, and where I am now, that yeah, I am like independently able to build a piece of a real application that is being used in a bank. That's something I'm grateful for. And next year I can give you another update about my second year in IT. So thank you for attention, and wish you all Merry Christmas and all the best to the new year.
Ooh, thank you, Lenka. It was a very powerful talk, and hopefully we will have more talks like that with help of all of us. Cool. So let's have a little bit of break. So let's say 10 to, what is it now, 8. 10 to 9 for George and Sinan. We will meet here. No, what? Yes, 10 to 9. And we will continue with Sinan. So grab a beer, grab water, have a little round and stand up to do something for your health. In the meantime, I will use this little break for the usual commercial advertisement, where we're still looking for more speakers, probably both teams, Praha as well as Brno. So if you're interested in 2022 for any kind of a most likely virtual and later on hopefully in person talk, don't hesitate and contact us over any links available. Dan, maybe can you post your side on the chat where to contact? And I'll ask Aneška to do the same for Brno. Well, Aneška's not here. Cool. The time is up. Break is over. So let's go back to the lightning talk session. Next up, Sinan. Thank you very much for joining. The floor is yours. Floor is yours.
Okay, great. So let me quickly start my timer because I tend to talk a lot, and share my screen here, this one. So I believe everyone can see my screen right now, correct?
All few of them, yes.
All right. Okay, cool. So first things first. So there's some notes between, I don't know, junior to mid. I don't know. I guess pretty much every developer should know about this. I'm kind of an old school developer, so I started with Quick Basic, then Turbo Pascal, Turbo C. So basically, I worked with very ancient programming languages in the beginning, and that was the era of 56K modems. So we were dialing with dial-up modems basically, and the internet was crappy, but still there were online games. So there were still multiplayer games that you could play even with that kind of crappy networks. And there was a very rigid reason for that. Back then, the people who coded the networks, the IP layers, like the TCP IP connections there, were doing things cleverly. So as the technology progressed more and more, we become a bit more, I guess, lazy. So we didn't mind wasting bandwidth, because bandwidth is all we have right now. So we decided that, okay, maybe we can push kilobytes or megabytes of data to the client side, and just it shall be there within a few seconds. It shouldn't be a big deal. So we started to move from these tiny little bits to XML and JSON and whatnot. And in the end, we forget about what we initially did. And I guess it was last year or the year before, I have a friend who is a front-end developer, and he's quite enthusiastic about the technology, but he's still at his early 20s. So still we have like 15 years of age gap. So the upcoming thing really describes where he comes from. He came with a great passion that he told me, hey, have you seen Google protocol buffers? And I was like, yeah, I just heard about it. So can you please describe it? Like, what's it? And he started to mention how Google serializes the data, like you write your data structures, then compile them and import them to the programming language, and that kind of intelligently crafts your data. And I was like, okay, but this a bit sounds like scam, because that's all what people used to do back in 90s and early 2000s, and Google just put some extra complexity there and showed it like it's a very cool technology. So basically they just got an idea and tried to make it a bit generalized solution. But in fact, with the proto compiler, etc., it's not that easy generalization, we can say. So today I wanted to talk a bit about the raw socket in Python and in general, actually, and how we can get benefit of it without using protocol buffers or any additional extra complexity. Because deep down, you don't really need protocol buffers if you understand the bytes and bits of what you're doing. So in this exercise, I will start with something simple. So I will first start with what's a byte in network. So even though on our computers, we have different byte orders, like 16 bits, 32 bits, 64 bits, etc. For networking in TCP/IP, it's 8 bits for 1 byte. So you have a very limited byte bits, but still anything that goes through the network is encoded within these zeros and ones. We all know about what's a bit, what's a byte, but we never really thought much about it. And today, I will first start with a very simple example, which is, I had this Zoom's extra screen gadgets. Anyways, so I will first start with server 1. So this is a very simple socket. In the sockets, it's a listening server, and it listens to TCP. And what it listens is actually, it just expects to receive some amount of bytes, or it sends some amount of bytes. How much of bytes it will receive, it's totally up to you. So how much you want to send, it's again totally up to you. So it's quite generic in that terms, but there are also some pitfalls, like that's what we call buffer size, the amount of bytes that you read. And there's a bit of small stuff that you have to keep in mind. It's to know where to stop. So if you are crafting something in sockets, you either need to know if you have an ending marker. So in this example, new line operator, like new line character is my end marker, or you have to know explicitly how much bytes you want to get, and that's what you get in the HTTP headers. Actually, in HTTP headers, it sends the amount of bytes that it's supposed to send. So here I have a very simple echo server. I'm gonna use Netcat to test this. So if you haven't used already, Netcat is a very cool networking tool. So I start server 1.py, and it accepts my connection. Then whatever I write, it just echoes back. And then it quits because it's a synchronized work, and that's how it's supposed to work. So as I have 3 minutes left, from this moment to the protocol buffers. So here within my files, I have a smart home module. So simply speaking, this is a data class. I have several flags of my smart home. Is the front door open, back door open? I have 6 windows here. And here I have 4 lights and heater, security cam, as well as a timestamp. So all of these can just fit into 6 bytes, because when we think about bytes and bits, actually, even though one Boolean is 1 byte, but it's just 1 or 0. So simply speaking, when you have 8 bits, you can simply use each bit as a Boolean flag. Just no need to waste any additional bytes for it. You can just fit 8 flags into 1 byte. And here I have some helper functions here, which modifies the bit value I want with a Boolean, which gets a bit, and somehow I copied the same function. I don't know why, probably some copy-paste error. So my data class has a serializer and deserializer. So with the first status byte, I just set each individual bit to my Boolean flags. And for my second byte, I again I only use the first 6 bits of it. So the other remaining 2 bits are wasted. I don't care. I could have used that for something else. And for time bytes, here I pack my timestamp integer into bytes. So it's going to be 4 bytes. And here I just pack all these bytes together and return a 6-byte array. And within the same class, I have a deserializer class method, which returns the smart home status. There's a thing that is called byte order. Byte order defines in which way you will start counting the bits, from left to right or right to left, you can say. It's big endian or little endian. And here, this struct pack uses big endian. So I'm just reading it with the same order. And I'm constructing my class from get bit. Like I'm getting the exact bits that I want to receive. And I just get the timestamp from integer from bytes. From byte 2 to 6, it's going to be my timestamp. So here in this example, I have a well-crafted data class, and I know how to craft it. There is no protobuffer compiler, nothing at all. It's just raw bytes. It's just about knowing how much of bytes you actually need. So I have a home server, and I have a home client. So I just move this here. So what home client does is it connects to my localhost. It gets null. So initially it connects, then it receives explicitly 6 bytes from the server because I know the byte size. So it receives 6 bytes from the server, deserializes it, and creates the status of the home. And I print it to the screen as JSON. Then I change the timestamp, change the some of the flags, I serialize it, and I'm sending it back to server using send, socket send, and data is updated. And on the server side, home server is also crafted to receive 6 bytes explicitly. That's how it can receive the object from the client and updates the global variable. So if I run this over and over again, you will notice that the timestamp here is changing because that's actually coming from the client side. And the home server is just this small. It just sends the existing status of the home status, which is a global variable, and then receives 6 bytes for the update and updates the home status in the global and closes the client connection, and that's it. So long story short, sockets are not scary. They used to be scary because we used to program sockets using C or C++, where you had to deal with the memory allocations and deallocations as well. But when you have the power of Python with the garbage collector and not necessarily like caring much about how you waste your bytes in your code, then you craft something easier. And when you do these things, well crafted, then your network size will drop dramatically, which is suitable for creating online games. So instead of throwing kilobytes of JSON data unnecessarily, you can pack the same, like this much amount of data into 6 bytes, and that's it. It's all about knowing your bytes. So thank you so much for listening, and I can get to questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Sinan, for that. Do we have any questions then?
And also, you can find the source codes here. I'll just copy this to the chat as well.
I'm glad that I muted myself when I wanted to speak, but yeah, chat is the best idea. Cool. I guess we don't have much of a questioning crowd. And thank you for reminding us that S in IoT stands for security. So hopefully you haven't presented your own house, but maybe your neighbor. Cool. So great. And the next one, last one will be George, who will tell us more about birds.
Yeah. Let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. I will talk to you about what happens when you have like when abstractions in like a framework confuse you, and like you feel like you don't know how to fix a problem, but like when you finally realize what happens, then you have the power to fix whatever comes your way. So like this talk is about Django. I don't know how many of you are working with Django, like because okay, Python is so widely used that I can't assume that all of you know Django. So like I will mention just the very basics, that it's a web framework. It's one of the like oldest ones of its kind. It's like over 15 years old now, like maybe a little bit younger than Ruby on Rails. It's highly modular, so like you can find packages for everything, and like it frequently, you can find frequently in the web that it has one of the most powerful ORM systems. And what an ORM system is, ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper, which is like a system that synchronizes a database table to a class in your code, right? And Django's ORM system is kind of inspired by a pattern called active record, which is like the same pattern that Ruby on Rails uses on its ORM, if I remember correctly. But it's ORM-ish, is active record-ish. It's not like the exact pattern, but very similar. And well, you can find more info about the active record pattern on the wiki, on Wikipedia. But let's say that it's the meaning of active record is that you map all the data of a database table onto like fields in a class, and all the methods of the class are methods to access or modify the source of data, like the database, for example, right? So let's basically, if you have any questions about what I said so far, hit me now, or I will go on to some examples and I will lead you slowly to the juicy part.
You like juicy?
I assume no questions. Let's go. So I will show you first quickly how we define a model in Django's ORM, right? Defining a model is just creating a class and subclassing from the model-based class that Django provides. And then you define using these fields, type fields, you define what your model, what you want your model to have, to contain, right? And what Django's ORM system does after you do a very specific mid-step, which is making the migrations. If you're not familiar with the notion of migration, is that ORM systems that do this synchronization need to, when you do a modification on your class, like adding a new field or removing a field or changing some parameter on a field, they need to apply the same change on the database table, right? Because they need to be in sync. And migrations are, we call migrations a script that apply these changes. So Django's ORM has a system that automatically generates the Python script for a migration. So after you create like your model, like in this example, by using Django's like make migrations command, Django generates this Python script file. And you can see here, there is a command there, like it uses a command called create model. And like when you read it first time, you say, okay, I assume that when Django runs this thing, it connects to the database, to my database, which like I have put all the configuration in the project's settings. It connects to the database and creates the table. And like this is one of the tricky things because it is not really doing that. But we see here that there is a command that says create model and lists all the models, all the fields that we defined. on the top, right? And we expect, what we expect to do is that this thing creates this table, right? And like when you're extending a model, the next thing is when you modify. What happens when you modify a model? Let's say you add like this new field called description. Like we had a to-do model up there. That's the simplest model and the one that is most used in examples. So let's say you modify the model. You make migrations again, and a new file is created that has the instructions for Django on what to modify, right? And we can see here that, wait, let me click it, that it adds a new field, which is called description and is of that type, right? So again, we assume that this command, when this script runs with another command that is called just migrate, we assume that when this runs, it modifies the table in the database and adds the column, which is not what happens again. And this is the tricky part that personally took me a long time to realize. And I realized it when like I had to modify migrations on my own because of some like fixes I wanted to do. Is that there is a separate notion in Django, a separate model, let's say, which Django builds by reading all the migration files from the first one up to the latest. And using that, so in our case, we have two migrations, the first one and the one that modifies and adds a new field. When Django, when we like hit again the command make migrations and Django checks if we have any new fields around, what it does is it first recreates this mental model it contains about all the past history. So it evaluates all the files, all the migration files from the first one to the last one, and creates this top thing here, which is like an internal like model state during the migration, which is this thing that is compared. This thing is what is compared with the actual class to find any differences. So when we add a new field, for example, if we wanted to add a JSON field in our model, it would be detected because Django would recreate the whole migration history, and then it would compare what is on the top with what is on the bottom. And it would say, okay, there is no metadata field on top. So I need to create a new migration that will add this field of that type. And this is not clear at all, like when you start using migrations. And it's even worse when it comes, you need to run some custom code. For example, let's say that you wanted to have this. You wanted to have your to-do item, your model, your Django model, and you wanted to have like a method on it called mark done. And we added here, we added two more fields, like the is done field and like the done at, which is a datetime field. And we want to keep when I marked this item is done, right? So let's say we are adding this method here, and you want to populate all the to-do items that are already in the database, to populate them, to populate those two new fields, right? Because you just added them, they are empty. And you want to write a custom migration for it, and you write this. So you have a migration dependency, let's say it's the last migration on, because like they are chained, right? All the migrations are chained. And let's say you add this, and this is a custom migration, which this is the way for you to access a model. And this is the tricky part, which took me quite a while to understand, is that this model here that you get with this function is not your class. It's because like you assume that, okay, there is a special way to access my class here, but it's not your class. And this instance is not an instance of your class. In fact, what you are accessing here is the mental or runtime model that Django resolved when it was running a migrations. So when you create this migration and you run this apps.get model, it means that I want to see this structure I had here. Where is it? Here. I want to access that structure. So you are accessing the runtime model that Django stores, and you operate on your data, on your database, based on that model, not on your real class. So this method here is not available to you because it's not that class, right? In order to use probably this method, you either need to like extract it in some function and include that function in the migration, inside the migration itself, or do some nasty stuff and bind this this instance in the class itself, which I do not recommend. And yeah, so like it is easy when you have like abstractions like Django's ORM system. It's easy to think like from your models class definition, oh, there is my model class, and there is the database, and they have like a direct connection. And like whatever is in the model, Django will magically map it into the table, and all that stuff will happen. So thinking that you have only two states, only two definitions, like there is the model and the database table, is false. And like you can easily like this abstraction can easily mislead you to that. In fact, there are three definitions, three states of the model, three definitions. And when there is a problem, like when Django can't produce a migration for you, or migration can't be applied on your database, it means that probably something is wrong either in your class definition. Your class definition doesn't agree with your like migration state, or of course your database table if you go in and manually alter the table structure. So that's it. Like if you are using Django and you have trouble with your migrations, you need to start to feel comfortable by managing and having like the notion of three different like places where your models are defined.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very, very much. Do we have questions? I see that Lenka has a note that she's struggling exactly with this issue at the moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and do I remember correctly that the when you run the migration, the error message is not helpful at all because you have no clue what's happening there?
Yeah.
So yeah, cool. So I see that we don't have any more questions at the moment, but yeah, this is the last lightning talk. Thank you very much all for joining. I'm gonna stop the recording now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.